it's their very first time. $100,000. $100,000. A man sat across the desk from the pastor, fixed him with his eye, and he said, $100,000. I'll write you a check payable to the church right now. $100,000. And all you have to do is say that my brother Tony was a saint. That's all you have to do. The pastor sat across from Phil, his eyes wide in surprise. You see, Phil and his now deceased brother Tony were no saints, not by any accounting. And they were well known in the area as businessmen. Yeah, that's what it was. They were businessmen, sort of. Lots of businesses. But anyone in town with an ounce of common sense stayed away from them. They were known to play footloose and fancy-free with the law. They dabbled in questionable stuff. In fact, a few years back, word has it that Phil won a full ride, all expense paid to Jackson State, and it wasn't for football. Now, Tony was dead, because you see, too much of the good life is bad for your blood sugar. And it's bad for your arteries, too. And Phil was anticipating the church would be full, and if you know Phil and Tony and their family, appearances are just about everything. $100,000. All you have to do is say in front of everybody that my brother Tony was a saint. The pastor was quiet, thinking to himself, weighing the offer. In fact, $100,000. That would do a lot of good things. Well, he was almost ashamed of himself that he would even consider the offer, because there is the matter of integrity, right? Your own integrity, the integrity of the gospel, the integrity of the pulpit. There is the matter, and no small matter, of telling the truth. He paused a moment and he had a glimmer of an idea. He said to Phil, I'll do it. The day of the funeral arrived, the church was full. Lots of business associates and people who owed Phil a favor, or two or three. The pastor stood just like I am in the pulpit. And he said, what shall we say about Tony? What shall we say for him? Poor guy. Well, I'll tell you this. Tony had a fascination his whole life with the seedier side of life. His whole life was an ongoing love affair with the dark. Tony was the kind of guy who would shake down his grandmother for her last nickel. He was the kind of guy who on a hot day would just knock off a lemonade stand and leave the kids crying just for kicks. But I gotta tell you, compared to Phil, Tony was a saint. Saint is, I think, a loaded word. It conjures up all kinds of images. It evokes feelings, especially today, those of you who have come to remember a dear loved one. We think of stained glass, we think of magnificent statues, we think of a lengthy canonization process that culminates with a wonderful new title for people who are dear to our hearts, people who, even today, the people whose names we sit and we wait for their name, to hear that name spoken in public again. We love them dearly, more than life itself. We would have laid down our lives for them, but we are not deluded. They were not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, yours or mine, or even Phil's. But much like the people whose names are listed and whose names will be read today, men and women through whom grace and love came into the world, and a world that needs grace and love, whose lives in certain moments bore a certain striking resemblance to Jesus because they belong to Jesus, and they still belong to Jesus. And even more than the culmination of a lengthy canonization process, that is what it ultimately means to be a saint in the strict New Testament sense. You may have noticed the texts this morning are filled with tears, filled with a longing for the heavenly banquet, for a new city where no one locks their doors, a new city without a hospital, A new city without any funeral homes, not even a single cemetery. And the names that we are gathered to listen for this morning, new tears, and knew that longing for a house not made by human hands. I can testify this morning that the saints whose names are read today knew mischief, and they knew joy, and they knew laughter, and lots of laughter. But like Mary, they knew the sting of death as well. There are two in particular who buried not only brothers and sisters, in some cases husbands and wives, but buried children. One in particular buried 2 children. But much like Mary, they knew the sting of grief, and everyone in this room knows that feeling, that weird feeling you get in and that pressure on your throat and on your chest, and that palpable sense of unreality, which I was reminded again at about 12:52 on August 18th, when my sister stayed behind because we wouldn't let my mother die by herself. That almost palpable sense of unreality, that she's not in the world anymore. And like Martha, they held on in spite of life's blows. They would say, nevertheless, I believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. You get to say that every week. In a world like this, you get to say that every week. Don't miss that chance. And what made such a confession possible was the truth that Jesus burst into tears, who called Lazarus by name, knew the names and cherished the faces of their loved ones. What made their confession possible is that Christ left the grave behind, and so no one is ever beyond his reach. Such a bold confession, such an amazing hope, such a heartfelt longing is not licensed, however, to deny the reality of death. Jesus doesn't dismiss death as, well, it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. It's an unfortunate fact of life that I have seen many, many, many people die. And in spite of what you might see on television, I will tell you the truth. We often die debilitated, we die exhausted, and the people around us are exhausted. We often die in pain, sometimes in great pain. And the one who cried at the death of his dear friend knows all about pain from personal experience. The denial of death, its seriousness, its impact, is not something that we traffic in at St. Mark Lutheran Church. But what we do, however, is we defy it. We defy it with Easter hope. We stand up to its threat in all the ways it manifests itself, because it is not the last thing. It is not the end. Death is not the end. It is not. It is the end of a chapter, but it is not the end. A number of preachers have pointed out that ultimately we are the ones to whom Jesus says, unbind him and let him go. That is our job in the world. Unbind him and let him go. And that can take many, many, many different forms. And we need to hear that again. All of us. We need to take it seriously. And to be reminded that ultimately what we are talking about today, and in fact whenever we gather, what we are talking about is the meaning of life. The meaning of your life. And I know you already know this, but I'll say it anyway because I'm a preacher and I have to say these things. The meaning of life isn't found ultimately in extended vacations. They're nice, I understand. It's not found in hobbies. They're nice too. It's most definitely not found on any field you can play on. It's not felt and found on a golf course. It's not found in a hockey rink. But as I said, you already knew that. But I thought it's good to be reminded. All I can say this morning is may these feeble words of mine comfort those who come to this church this morning brokenhearted. May it seek to awaken all of us to the importance of our calling as God's people in the world. And bind him, let him go.